In the wealthiest corners of America, behind gates of iron and walls of glass, some secrets are buried deeper than gold. This is the story of a mansion where money could buy everything. Everything except a child's voice. Grace Hollingsworth, daughter of one of the richest men in the state, had never spoken a single word. Doctors called it a condition. Her mother called it stubbornness. Her father buried the shame behind business meetings and donations. And so the mansion echoed not with laughter, not with life, but with silence. Until the day a new nanny arrived. She was not wealthy nor refined. She carried no designer bags, only faith. A black woman of humble origins, Ruth Johnson was hired out of necessity, expected to fail like the others before her. But what no one knew was that Ruth carried something this family had never shown the child: compassion. And with a single whispered word, she would unlock the silence that money, power, and pride had only deepened. But miracles do not come without battles. And when the truth of that silence comes to light, it will shake the mansion to its foundations and prove once again that God does not abandon the just. Stay with me, because what you are about to witness is not just a story of a child finding her voice. It is the story of love, triumphing over pride, and of justice moving in ways no one could imagine. Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. The old clock in the mansion strikes 6 in the morning as the automated curtains open by themselves, revealing the perfect garden watered overnight. In that palace of glass and marble, everything has a voice. Doors slide with electric whispers, soft jazz plays on hidden speakers, the staff walks with rehearsed steps. Only one person has no voice there: the little girl. She is 8 years old, with enormous eyes that hold an ocean of secrets and a presence that is almost invisible. Doctors said, selective mutism. Her mother translated it as stubbornness. Teachers tried. Therapies cost a fortune. Her father, Ethan Hollingsworth, a millionaire known across the state for investing in hospitals and technology, learned to measure success in charts and graphs. But no graph explains the silence of his own daughter. And when the subject comes up, the most powerful man in the city shrinks inside. The girl, Grace, walks through polished hallways holding a worn teddy bear. With every step, she listens. A mansion has many sounds: the ice machine, the robot vacuum, the ticking of the clock, the clink of silver cutlery. But none of them call her by name. The silence she carries is heavier than the silence of things. Vivian, her mother, loves large windows, discreet necklaces that cost small fortunes, and a rehearsed smile that rarely reaches her eyes. To society, she is the perfect hostess, elegantly charitable. At home, every detail must obey an invisible order: aligned glasses, puffed pillows, quiet voices, soft footsteps. The daughter who does not speak is an inconvenience that must be conquered by habit. And if habit doesn't work, contempt does. That morning, the housekeeper, Mrs. Caldwell, distributes tasks like a general in white gloves. "Everything ready for the senator's visit," she announces, chin raised. "And clean the east wing. The girl spilled crayons on the carpet yesterday." The staff exchanges weary glances. Caldwell knows the house better than anyone. She also knows hierarchies, and she keeps them sharp. Grace appears at the dining room door. For meals, she has a numbered chair, monogrammed napkins, and a special glass. No space for mistakes. No space for affection. Ethan, behind his tablet, declares, "Today we'll talk to the therapist from Boston over video." Vivian smiles without showing teeth. If she wants to communicate, she needs to learn cooperation. The girl lifts her spoon in silence. The mother murmurs to the housekeeper, 8 years already. What do we tell the senator? That the Hollingsworth heir won't even say thank you? Caldwell replies coldly, "Appearances matter." And as if the word appearances were a bell, 2 waiters enter with fruit cut into perfect shapes. In that house, appearance means more than truth. The driver, Hector, watches Grace from the staircase landing. A middle-aged man, he notices what others prefer to ignore. As the girl passes, her teddy falls. Hector bends down, returns the toy, and whispers, Good morning, little one. Grace stares with silent gratitude. He gestures with his hand, like giving a blessing. No one notices. Or maybe they notice and pretend not to. Throughout the day, the mansion fills with expensive flowers and calculated voices. The therapist on video explains techniques, speaks of positive reinforcement, of welcoming environments, of patience. Vivian interrupts. We've had patience long enough. Ethan frowns. He dislikes appearing impatient in meetings, even when his heart is a knot. We'll try whatever is necessary, he says, like closing a contract. Grace hides behind the sofa and draws with crayons. Her drawing shows a smaller house than this one, with an open window and a large tree. Below, two figures hold hands, one tall, one small. No necklaces, no white gloves, no glass, just a blue sky made of repeated strokes. When evening falls, the housekeeper arranges the girls' room. This mess is unhealthy, she says. She picks up an old photo. Grace on the lap of her former nanny, a Hispanic woman who stayed briefly, dismissed after small mistakes. The frame nearly disappears into a drawer. On the shelf, expensive books no one reads. On the dresser, perfumes the girl never uses. Everything seems to say, you live here, but you do not belong. Dinner is a display. French dishes, crystal glasses, aligned silverware. Vivian talks about a charity gala, drops names, smiles at guests. When she looks at her daughter, the smile vanishes. Eat properly, Grace. The girl obeys. In that house, obedience replaces dialogue. At the end, Vivian concludes, tomorrow the new nanny arrives. Someone with more backbone. We need results. The word results falls on the table like a hammer. When the guests leave, Ethan walks down the hallway toward his daughter's room. He stops at the half-open door. Grace sleeps hugging her teddy. The father whispers hesitantly, if you could tell me anything at all. His voice breaks. He understands contracts, but not unshed tears. He kisses her forehead and leaves, the hallway sinking into darkness. A short storm breaks that night. Distant lightning, wind against the palms. No one wakes, except maybe one. Grace sits up in bed, eyes open in the half-light. Thunder frightens her less than the house itself. Wind presses against the glass, and she thinks, in her silence, that the wind speaks. The wind calls her name. She presses her forehead to the cold window as if asking for help from a force unseen. In the morning, the iron gates open for a modest car, out of place among the mansion's polished machines. A woman steps out, dark-skinned, her posture firm, her eyes carrying both weariness and faith. A worn bag on her shoulder, a discreet rosary inside, and a serenity that does not match the rush of this house. Ruth Johnson, recommended by a neighborhood church, a woman who knows how to care for what is invisible to the world. Hector greets her with respect that needs no words. Welcome, Miss Ruth. She smiles. Thank you, son. As she crosses the marble hall, Ruth feels the cold rising through her shoes, but in her chest there is a fire, the certainty that God never abandons the just. She passes the wall of perfect portraits, smiles too wide, eyes too shallow. She feels the weight of stairs that are not stairs, only pictures, and she keeps walking. Vivian descends the staircase like a queen inspecting subjects. Punctuality is important. We expect discretion. The girl does not speak and, well, we need discipline. Ruth meets her eyes, steady but humble. Every child speaks when they feel safe. The phrase lingers in the air like a challenge. The housekeeper purses her lips. Ethan watches from afar, surprised by a courage he cannot find in his own mirrors. You start today, Vivian says curtly. Staff quarters, service wing, rules in this folder, no improvisation. Ruth takes the folder but holds on even more tightly to the piece she brought. Yes, ma'am. Upstairs in a hallway that smells of lavender and loneliness, Grace appears with her teddy. Her eyes meet Ruth's. No word, not yet. Only a silent recognition, as if two souls waved at each other from a distance. Ruth extends her hand slowly, without invading. A simple gesture, teaching with her body what no one ever taught with their heart. I am here. The girl hesitates, takes one step, then another. The whole world seems to hold its breath. The clock downstairs marks 9:05. The jazz stops playing. Even the air conditioner seems to quiet. Good morning, sweet girl, Ruth says, with tenderness that does not infantilize. Not an order, not a demand, just a meeting. Grace does not respond, but her teddy, pressed tightly to her chest, loosens a little. And for the first time in a long time, the girl's silence does not sound like absence. It sounds like waiting. The mansion does not notice. The housekeeper distributes more lists. Vivian takes expensive phone calls. Ethan dives into spreadsheets. But in that small corner of the hallway, something subtle moved, like the breeze before a storm. And the silence, so ancient, trembled. Because a child's voice may sleep for years, but it never dies. And when faith meets that voice, even in a whisper, the impossible begins to crack. The mansion wakes up early, as always, but this morning the air feels heavier. Word has spread among the staff. The new nanny has arrived. For some it means relief, someone else to take care of the little girl no one understands. For others it means rivalry, one more servant to shuffle into the fragile hierarchy that governs the Hollingsworth estate. Ruth Johnson walks through the service entrance, her shoes polished but worn, her bag pressed to her side. She had not slept much the night before. The walls of the staff quarters are thin, and whispers travel fast. She won't last a week, someone had said in the laundry room. The girl's impossible, and Mrs. Vivian doesn't tolerate mistakes. But Ruth has lived through storms greater than gossip. She hums a hymn under her breath as she adjusts her uniform, not the designer outfits of the staff in the main house, but a plain dress and apron that already mark her as an outsider. She lifts her chin. I am here for the child, not for their approval. In the grand dining hall, Vivian sits at the head of the table, a porcelain cup in her hand, her posture sharp as glass. Ethan scrolls through his phone, pretending to listen as she dictates instructions. Mrs. Caldwell, the housekeeper, stands nearby, eyes narrow, making sure the rules are followed. When Ruth is summoned inside, the atmosphere shifts. Vivian inspects her the way one might inspect a new piece of furniture, not unkindly but with cold detachment. You are punctual, she remarks, as if it were the bare minimum. The girl can be challenging. Your job is simple. Keep her quiet, keep her presentable, and above all, do not embarrass this family. Ruth bows her head slightly, but her voice is steady. Children are never problems, ma'am. Only hearts waiting to be heard. A silence falls over the room. Ethan looks up from his phone, curious. Caldwell arches an eyebrow, unimpressed. Vivian's lips tighten. She does not like servants who come with philosophies. You will learn quickly, Vivian replies, her tone like ice over steel. This is not a place for experiments. We value discretion. Yes, ma'am, Ruth answers softly, though something in her eyes says she will not be silenced by rules alone. Grace appears at the doorway, clutching her teddy. She lingers, half hidden behind the heavy oak frame, watching. Her gaze flickers between her mother's rigid smile, Caldwell's narrowed eyes, and Ruth's calm face. The child says nothing, but her small steps bring her closer to the new nanny. Caldwell notices. Miss Grace, she scolds gently, you should not lurk in doorways, it is improper. But Ruth does not scold. She kneels down, lowering herself to the girl's height, and simply holds out a hand. Not forcing, not demanding, just waiting. Grace hesitates, then takes 2 timid steps, stopping just short of touching. She doesn't respond to anyone, Caldwell mutters, as if preparing Ruth for failure. She lives in her own world. Ruth smiles, never looking away from Grace. Then perhaps someone should visit her world instead of dragging her into ours. Vivian lets out a faint laugh, but it has no warmth. We shall see how long your optimism lasts. The morning drags on with introductions and instructions. Ruth is shown the playroom, vast, sterile, filled with expensive toys untouched. still in their boxes. Grace prefers the corner, where an old set of crayons and papers remain hidden under a cushion. Ruth notices immediately. This child doesn't need more toys. She needs someone to notice what she already has. Later, in the staff kitchen, Ruth takes her lunch quietly. The chatter around her grows pointed. "She thinks she's special," whispers one maid. "Wait until Mrs. Vivian snaps at her," says another. Caldwell enters, her presence silencing the room. "Let me be clear," she announces, her voice clipped. "In this house, the rules are not suggestions. The sooner you learn them, the longer you last. If you try to be clever, if you think you can outshine the rest of us, you will find yourself out on the street by morning." Ruth meets her gaze calmly. "I'm not here to shine, Mrs. Caldwell. I'm here to serve. And to protect the child." The word protect lingers. Caldwell frowns, unsettled, as if Ruth has struck a chord she didn't expect. That evening, Vivian holds a small gathering in the living room. Crystal glasses, soft laughter, music drifting from a grand piano. Grace sits silently in a corner, ignored except when her mother urges her to smile for guests. Ruth stands discreetly at the back, watching. A woman in pearls leans toward Vivian and whispers, not quietly enough. Still not speaking. Poor thing. What a burden. Vivian forces a smile. "We're trying everything. Therapists, specialists, now even a new nanny. But nothing works. Some children simply refuse." The guests nod politely. But in that moment, Ruth sees Grace lower her head, clutching the teddy tighter, her small shoulders trembling. Not a tantrum, not a cry, just a quiet collapse inward. Ruth steps forward, not close enough to draw attention, but just enough to hum a gentle tune under her breath. A hymn her grandmother used to sing when storms shook the roof. The sound is soft, barely audible, but Grace lifts her head. Her eyes meet Ruth's, and for the first time all evening, the girl's breathing steadies. No one else notices. The piano continues. The wine flows. Vivian laughs too loudly. But Ruth knows, and Grace knows. Something has begun. The girl may still be silent, but silence can hold power. Power waiting to be unlocked. The first week feels like a test. Ruth moves carefully through the mansion, aware that every step, every word is being watched, not just by Grace, but by Vivian and Mrs. Caldwell, who seem to wait for her to slip. At breakfast, the dining hall glitters with silver and china. Vivian discusses charity luncheons and board meetings while Ethan buries himself in news articles. Grace sits quietly, pushing food around her plate. Ruth stands nearby, hands folded, observing. "Eat properly, Grace," Vivian says without glancing at her daughter. "Don't hunch. You'll ruin your posture." Grace straightens, silent as always. Her small fork trembles. Vivian turns to Ruth, her tone sharp, though her smile remains fixed. "This is where you come in. Make sure she behaves like a young lady. We will not have her embarrassing us in public." Ruth nods politely. But in her heart she thinks, the child needs kindness, not correction. Mrs. Caldwell notices the hesitation in Ruth's eyes. After the meal, she corners her in the pantry. "Don't think your job is to question orders," she warns, her voice low. "Mrs. Hollingsworth does not tolerate disobedience. Neither do I. You are here to make the child presentable. That's all." Ruth meets her gaze, calm but firm. "Children aren't ornaments, Mrs. Caldwell, they're people." Caldwell's lips press into a thin line. "Watch yourself. That kind of talk will get you dismissed." The humiliations are subtle, but constant. When Ruth sets the table, Caldwell inspects every fork and knife, running her finger along the edge as though searching for flaws. When Ruth prepares Grace's bath, Vivian criticizes the water temperature. Too warm, she'll get sick. The next day, too cold, do you want her to freeze? Even in small moments, disdain drips from their words. One afternoon, Ruth guides Grace into the garden. The child lingers near the roses, tracing petals with her finger. Ruth kneels beside her. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she whispers. Grace's eyes lift briefly, curious. Caldwell storms out onto the patio. The garden is not a playground. If she ruins those flowers, you'll pay for it out of your wages. Grace shrinks back, clutching her teddy. Ruth rises slowly, standing between the girl and Caldwell. She was only looking. Flowers are meant to be seen, are they not? Caldwell glares. You forget your place. Ruth lowers her voice, steady but firm. My place is beside the child. The housekeeper turns on her heel, muttering under her breath. That evening, Vivian entertains guests in the grand salon. Grace is dressed in lace and satin, placed on display like one of her mother's jewels. The guests fawn over her beauty but whisper about her silence. Such a shame, one woman says behind a jeweled hand. All that wealth and she can't even speak. Vivian forces a laugh, though her eyes flash with irritation. We're doing everything possible, but some children refuse to cooperate. The room chuckles softly, as though Grace were not standing right there. The child's cheeks flush. Her eyes drop to the floor. Ruth watches from the corner, her heart breaking. She sees the girl's small hands tighten around her dress, sees the humiliation etched across her silent face. After the guests leave, Vivian lashes out. Why didn't you stop her from fidgeting? She looked ridiculous, standing there like a statue. She's just a child, Ruth replies softly. Vivian's eyes narrow. A child of this family. She must learn her place. Ruth's jaw tightens, but she bows her head. She has learned that resistance for now must be quiet. Later that night, when the mansion grows still, Ruth finds Grace awake in her bed, eyes wide open. She sits beside her, smoothing the child's hair. You are not a statue, Ruth whispers. You are a precious little girl, and one day, your voice will be heard. Grace looks at her, the faintest spark flickering in her eyes. She does not speak, not yet, but she shifts closer, resting her head against Ruth's arm. In that moment, Ruth understands. The girl has been waiting. Waiting for someone to see her not as a burden, not as an embarrassment, but as a soul worth protecting. And while the mansion's walls echo with coldness, in that small corner of the nursery, warmth quietly begins to grow. Because humiliation may silence for a time. But love, patient, steadfast love, has the power to awaken. The mansion is never truly silent. Even at night, there is always a hum. The air conditioner, the security system, the faint buzz of machines. Yet for Ruth, the loudest sound of all is the absence of Grace's voice. Day after day, Ruth observes the child. She sees the way Grace moves like a shadow, drifting through hallways with her teddy in hand, unnoticed by most. Staff step aside as if she were invisible. Guests barely acknowledge her presence. Her own mother treats her as a problem to be solved, not a daughter to be loved. But Ruth notices something others do not. Grace is always watching. When Vivian scolds the maids, Grace watches. When Caldwell inspects the silverware with a sharp eye, Grace watches. When her father hides behind his tablet instead of speaking to her, Grace watches. She takes in every gesture, every expression, as though the world speaks a language of movement instead of words. One morning, Ruth sits with her in the playroom. Toys line the shelves, untouched and perfect, like museum exhibits. Grace ignores them, reaching instead for crayons tucked beneath the cushion where she hid them days before. She draws quietly. A tree, a sun, two figures holding hands. Ruth leans closer. That's beautiful, Grace. The girl pauses, glancing at her, eyes wide as if surprised someone noticed. Her gaze lingers longer than before. You like drawing people, Ruth continues softly. Maybe one day you'll draw me, For a fleeting second, the corners of Grace's lips twitch upward. Not a smile exactly, but a flicker of something alive. That afternoon, Vivian prepares for another social event. Dresses are chosen, jewelry polished. Grace is dressed in pale silk and told to sit properly while guests arrive. But as Ruth stands nearby, she feels a tug at her sleeve. Grace's small hand clutches the fabric, eyes lifted, not with fear, but with need. The gaze is piercing. Ruth kneels beside her. "What is it, sweet one?" Grace says nothing, but her eyes speak. They are not blank like before. They are searching, almost pleading. Ruth places her hand gently over the girl's. "I'm here," she whispers. Caldwell notices and frowns. Don't encourage her. The child must learn discipline, not dependence. But Ruth ignores the sting of those words. She sees something Caldwell cannot. The girl is reaching out, in her own way, through her eyes. Later, in the garden, Ruth takes Grace outside to escape the suffocating air of the mansion. The wind rustles the trees, and the sunlight catches in the child's hair. For a moment she looks less like a shadow, and more like a flame, waiting to spark. Grace stops near the roses again. She turns to Ruth, staring intently, as if studying her face for answers. "What is it, my darling?" Ruth asks gently. The gaze deepens. It is not a simple look. It is as though the child is trying to speak without words, as though her silence is filled with meaning no one else has cared to listen to. Ruth feels a shiver run down her spine. She kneels, meeting Grace's eyes at the same level. "I see you," she whispers. "Even if you never say a word, I see you." For the first time, Grace lets go of her teddy with one hand and reaches out, resting her tiny fingers against Ruth's cheek. Her eyes glisten, not with tears, but with something more fragile. Trust. That night, Ruth sits by Grace's bed after lights out. The house is quiet, but the child is still awake, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. She does not move, only stares at Ruth as though her gaze alone could hold her there. Ruth clasps the girl's small hand and whispers a prayer, not loud enough for anyone else to hear. "Lord, give her peace, and when the time is right, give her voice. Until then, let her know she is loved." Grace does not speak, but she does not let go. Her gaze remains fixed on Ruth until sleep finally overtakes her. The next morning, when Vivian scolds Ruth for being too soft, Ruth simply bows her head. But inside she carries a secret certainty. The girl is not lost. The girl is not broken. The girl is simply waiting, waiting for the right moment, the right touch, the right word. And Ruth knows deep in her soul that when that moment comes, it will shake the walls of this mansion. For the girl's gaze is not empty. It is a seed. And seeds, when nurtured, always find a way to bloom. The mansion sleeps, but Ruth is still awake. Nights here are heavy. The silence of wealth is not peaceful, but suffocating. She often lies in the small staff quarters, staring at the ceiling, praying quietly. Yet tonight, something draws her to the nursery. She pushes the door open gently. Grace is awake, as if waiting. Her small frame sits upright in bed, the teddy pressed tightly against her chest. The child's eyes glimmer in the dim glow of the nightlight, not with fear, but with restless longing. Ruth steps inside, closing the door behind her. "Couldn't sleep, little one," she whispers. Grace does not answer, but her gaze follows Ruth as faithfully as a shadow. Ruth sits on the edge of the bed. For a moment she just watches the child breathe. Then she takes the girl's hand in hers, warm and trembling. "You've been carrying so much inside, haven't you?" Ruth murmurs. "But you don't have to carry it alone." Grace tilts her head as if she understands. Her eyes, so often dull and distant, seem to widen with attention. Ruth closes her eyes and begins to pray softly, her voice low, steady, almost like a lullaby. "Lord, this child has been silenced by sorrow. Let her feel your love. Let her know she is safe. Give her the courage to find her voice, in your time." The room feels different as the words fill the air, softer, warmer, as if the prayer itself has weight. Ruth opens her eyes and sees Grace staring at her, unblinking, as if those words have struck something deep. Ruth leans closer, her lips near the girl's ear, and whispers a single word. "Beloved." The word hangs in the air like a secret only they share. Grace does not respond. Not with her lips, not with sound. but her small fingers tighten around Ruth's hand as if holding on to the word itself. Ruth whispers it again, slower, softer. Beloved. The child blinks, her eyes moist now, though no tears fall. She presses her teddy tighter, her lips parting just slightly, as though the word is circling inside her, waiting. Waiting. Ruth kisses her forehead. That's who you are. No matter what anyone says, no matter how they look at you, you are beloved. The following days, Ruth repeats the word often, but never loudly. In the garden, as they sit under the oak tree, she whispers, Beloved. In the playroom, as Grace draws pictures of trees and open windows, Ruth leans close and says, Beloved. At bedtime, as the child lies awake, Ruth prays and repeats it once more. And every time the girl's gaze grows more alive. Her eyes sparkle, her shoulders relax, her little hand clings more tightly to Ruth's. The word is becoming a bridge carrying her across the silence, but not everyone approves. One afternoon, Caldwell walks into the nursery unannounced, catching Ruth whispering the word again. What are you doing? Caldwell snaps. Ruth turns calmly. Speaking to her heart, Caldwell scoffs. Nonsense. She needs structure, not fairy tales. Do not fill her head with silly notions. Mrs. Hollingsworth will not tolerate it. Ruth stands her ground. Mrs. Hollingsworth can call it what she likes. But I will not let this child believe she is anything less than loved. Caldwell's eyes narrow, her voice dropping to a hiss. Careful, Ruth. One wrong step and you'll be out on the street. And trust me, Vivian would not think twice. But Ruth does not flinch. She kneels again beside Grace, ignoring the housekeeper's shadow. You are beloved, she whispers one more time, firm yet tender. Grace looks at her, her lips parting again. Closer now, closer than ever before to breaking the silence. That night, as a storm rolls over the mansion, thunder rumbling in the distance, Ruth sits beside the girl's bed once more. Grace is restless, tossing and turning. Ruth smooths her hair, humming a hymn between whispers. You don't need to be afraid. Not of storms, not of this house, not of anyone. Because you are... She pauses, her lips brushing the girl's ear. Beloved. Grace's eyes snap open. Her breathing quickens. For the first time she makes a sound. Not a word, not yet, but a faint gasp, like a voice struggling to surface. Ruth freezes, heart pounding, then squeezes her hand gently. It's all right, sweetheart. Take your time. The day will come. She does not push. She does not demand. She only waits, whispering again and again until the storm outside passes. Beloved, beloved, beloved. And though no one else in the mansion hears it, something stirs that night. The silence has begun to crack. Morning light spills through the mansion's glass walls, but the house is restless. Vivian has arranged a brunch for important guests, business partners, donors, and neighbors whose approval she craves. Every detail is rehearsed, flowers perfectly aligned, champagne chilled, silverware gleaming. For Vivian, this is more than a social event. It is a stage, and Grace, silent as always, will be her greatest shame or her unexpected trophy. Make sure she behaves, Vivian instructs Ruth coldly as she fastens her diamond bracelet. I will not have her ruining this day. Yes, ma'am, Ruth replies, but her heart whispers a different prayer. Lord, let today be the day. The living room fills with elegant chatter. Guests compliment the mansion's design, the rare paintings, the perfectly groomed garden visible through the tall windows. Ethan makes polite conversation, though his eyes keep drifting toward his daughter, seated quietly in her lace dress, teddy in hand. She's lovely, one woman says with a smile too sharp to be sincere. But still no words, I hear. Vivian forces a laugh. Some children take longer, that's all. We're working on it, with the best specialists money can buy. The guests nod, sipping champagne. Grace lowers her head, shoulders curling inward. Her small hands tremble against the teddy's worn fur. She does not cry. She has learned not to. But Ruth sees the silent storm brewing in her eyes. Ruth kneels beside her, leaning close. She does not raise her voice, not in this room full of judgment. Instead, she whispers the word that has become their secret. Beloved. Grace looks up. Her gaze locks with Ruth's. For the first time, there is no hesitation, only urgency. Ruth repeats, softer, beloved. The child's lips part. A sound escapes, fragile, trembling, but unmistakable. The room freezes. Glasses stop clinking. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. All eyes turn toward the little girl. Grace's chest rises, her voice catching, but she pushes again, louder this time, as if breaking through a wall that has held her for years. Beloved. The word rings in the air, pure and trembling. For a heartbeat, no one moves. Ethan drops his glass, shattering crystal against the marble floor. Vivian's painted smile collapses into shock. Guests gasp, covering their mouths. Grace blinks as if surprised by the sound of her own voice. Then she clutches Ruth's hand tightly, her small face glowing with a light no silence could hide anymore. Tears well in Ethan's eyes. He rushes to his daughter, kneeling on the marble, heedless of the shards beneath him. Grace, you spoke. His voice breaks. Sweetheart, say it again. Please. Grace turns her head, searching for Ruth. Ruth nods gently, encouraging. The girl takes a deep breath, then repeats, stronger now, her voice steady though fragile. Beloved. The word is not for her father, not for her mother, not for the room of strangers. It is for the woman who whispered it into her soul, who believed in her when no one else did. Guests murmur in awe. Some clap softly, others wipe their eyes, but Vivian's face hardens. She forces herself to stand, to regain control. Well, she says tightly, perhaps it was a fluke. Children mimic sounds. That doesn't mean… Vivian! Ethan's voice is firm, louder than it has been in years. His hand trembles as he strokes his daughter's hair. Don't diminish this. Our daughter spoke. Do you understand? She spoke. But Vivian turns away, fury burning behind her composure. She cannot stand the truth, that the nanny, not she, had unlocked her daughter's voice. As the guests depart, still whispering about the miracle they witnessed, Vivian pulls Ruth aside in the hallway. Her words are venom wrapped in silk. You will not parade yourself as a savior, she hisses. Do you hear me? You are staff, nothing more. If you dare take credit for what happened today, you will regret it. Ruth meets her glare with calm strength. I don't need credit, ma'am. The only thing that matters is that Grace has found her voice. Vivian's hand trembles as she points toward the staff quarters. Stay in your place, or I will see you gone by morning. But Ruth does not flinch. She looks back toward the nursery where Grace sits clutching her teddy, her lips softly mouthing the word again and again. Beloved, beloved, beloved. And for the first time in years, the mansion does not feel heavy with silence. It feels alive with hope. The morning after the miracle, the Hollingsworth mansion is buzzing. Word has already spread among the staff. The girl spoke. Some whisper in awe, others in disbelief. But all agree on one thing. It happened when she was with Ruth. In the kitchen, maids gather in hushed voices. Did you hear? She said a word. I was there, clear as day. Beloved. And right after Miss Ruth whispered to her, the door swings open, Caldwell steps in, her eyes narrowing at the chatter. Enough. Back to work. Don't you dare feed into this nonsense. It was luck. An accident. Nothing more. But the staff exchange glances. They know it was more than luck. Upstairs, Vivian sits at her vanity, staring at her reflection. The mirror shows perfection. Flawless hair, flawless skin, flawless pearls. Yet she cannot stop replaying the moment. Her daughter's first word, spoken not to her, not in her arms, but to the nanny. Vivian grips the edge of the table until her knuckles whiten. It should have been me. When Ruth enters the nursery that morning, she finds Grace already awake, repeating the words softly to herself, as though practicing. Ruth kneels, smiling through tears of quiet joy. "Good morning, beloved." Grace's lips tremble, but she answers, barely audible, "Be loved." Ruth hugs her gently, her heart soaring, but the door slams open. Vivian stands there, her face like stone. "That's enough." Ruth rises slowly. "Mrs. Hollingsworth, I said enough." Vivian steps forward, seizing the teddy bear from her daughter's hands. Grace flinches, her eyes filling with terror. "You are encouraging nonsense. She needs proper therapy, not whispered superstitions." "She needs love," Ruth says firmly, unable to hold back. "That word is not nonsense, it's who she is. It's what she deserves." Vivian's eyes flash. "And who are you to decide what my daughter deserves? You are staff. You are nothing." Grace's hands reach desperately for her teddy, but Vivian keeps it out of reach. "She belongs to this family, not to you. Do not confuse your place here." Ruth breathes deeply, steadying herself. "I know my place. It's beside the child. And nothing you say will change that." Vivian's voice drops to a hiss. "Then you leave me no choice." Later that day, Ethan returns home early. He finds his wife pacing in the study, her tone sharp and cold. "She must go," Vivian insists. "That woman is undermining me in my own home. She's poisoning Grace with her foolish ideas." Ethan frowns. "Vivian, for the first time in her life, our daughter spoke. Are you really suggesting we fire the person who made that happen?" Vivian slams her glass on the table. "It was coincidence. Do you think some uneducated servant has power a team of specialists did not? No, Ethan. She is manipulating the child. And you." Ethan exhales, torn. He remembers the sound of his daughter's voice, fragile yet real. But Vivian's fury is relentless. "She will not stay another week," she declares. That evening, Ruth is called to the drawing room. Vivian sits like a queen on her throne, Caldwell standing at her side. Ethan is there too, though his expression is weary. "Ruth," Vivian begins, her voice deceptively calm. "We appreciate your efforts, but your methods are unorthodox and, frankly, disruptive. We have decided it's best you move on." Ruth's heart clenches, but she keeps her composure. "Mrs. Hollingsworth, I'm not here for methods. I'm here for Grace. She needs stability. She needs someone who sees her." "She needs her mother," Vivian snaps. Grace appears at the doorway, eyes wide, sensing the storm. She clings to the frame, terrified. Ruth takes a step toward her. "Sweetheart." "Don't you dare," Vivian hisses, blocking the path. "Pack your things, tonight." Grace shakes her head violently, small hands balling into fists. Her lips move, desperate to form the word again, but no sound comes. Her silent plea echoes louder than any scream. Ruth bends down, her eyes locking with the child's. She doesn't whisper this time. She says it clearly for all to hear. "You are beloved." Grace gasps, tears streaking her face. She reaches for Ruth, but Caldwell pulls the nanny back, ushering her toward the door. Vivian's triumph is cold and hollow. "Take her away." In the silence that follows, Grace collapses to her knees, clutching her teddy as if her world is shattering. Ethan turns away, unable to bear the sight. And as Ruth is forced out of the room, her heart breaks, not for herself, but for the little girl left behind in the shadows of her mother's pride. But deep within Ruth's spirit, a certainty remains. This fight is not over, because no force on earth, not pride, not wealth, not cruelty, can silence the truth forever. And one day soon, Grace's voice will rise again. The mansion feels darker without Ruth. Hours after she is forced from the nursery, Grace withdraws completely, her fragile voice retreating back into silence. She clutches her teddy bear, rocking slightly, her eyes empty once more. Vivian moves through the halls like nothing has changed. "She'll forget that woman," she insists to Caldwell. "It was a temporary attachment, nothing more." But her words ring hollow. Even Caldwell, loyal as she is, sees the emptiness growing heavier in the child's eyes. Ethan notices too. At dinner he tries gently. "Grace, sweetheart, would you like some soup?" No reply, not even a glance. The spark he saw days ago has vanished. His chest tightens with dread. "Give her time," Vivian says coldly, sipping her wine. "She'll adapt." But Ethan doesn't believe it. He saw the miracle with his own eyes. He heard the word, and he knows it wasn't coincidence. That night, Ruth lies awake in the small staff quarters, tears streaking her face. She has not been dismissed officially, not yet. Vivian wields power with threats first, but Ruth knows her days here are numbered. Still she prays. "Lord, do not let this child be silenced again. Show me what hides in this house. Show me the truth." Her prayer does not go unanswered. The next morning, Ruth goes to the laundry room. Caldwell is there, giving orders, distracted. As Ruth folds linens, she overhears two maids whispering by the sink. "You know why she doesn't talk, don't you?" one says softly. The other glances nervously. "Careful. If Mrs. Caldwell hears, she was in the East Wing that night, she knows." Ruth pretends not to listen, but every word burns into her chest. Later, when the maids leave, Ruth approaches the older one in the hallway. "What did you mean?" she asks gently. "What happened in the East Wing?" The woman hesitates, fear in her eyes. "I can't. Mrs. Hollingsworth would ruin me if I spoke." Ruth clasps her hand, her voice trembling but firm. "This isn't about us, it's about the child, please." The maid swallows hard, then leans close, whispering, "When she was smaller, she saw things she shouldn't have. Mrs. Hollingsworth in one of her rages. The girl tried to scream, but no sound came. After that, she never spoke again." Ruth's heart shatters. "You mean, it was trauma, not illness?" The maid nods, eyes wet. "We all knew. But no one dares say it. Not against Mrs. Hollingsworth." That evening, Ruth finds Ethan alone in his study, staring at an untouched glass of whiskey. She hesitates, then steps forward. "Mr. Hollingsworth, you deserve to know the truth." Ethan looks up, weary. "What truth?" Ruth takes a breath. Grace isn't silent because she can't speak. She's silent because she's afraid. She carries a wound no medicine can heal. His brow furrows. Afraid of what? Ruth's voice trembles. Of her mother. Ethan's glass slips, spilling amber liquid across the desk. "No, Vivian may be strict, but..." "Strict?" Ruth cuts in, her calm breaking into passion. She belittles her, humiliates her, treats her like an accessory. But there's more, isn't there? Something happened that night in the East Wing. Something no child should see. Ethan pales, his hand shaking. He remembers a night years ago. Vivian screaming, doors slamming, Grace clutching her teddy, her little face frozen in terror. He had dismissed it then, telling himself children forget. But they don't. Grace hadn't forgotten. She had buried her voice to survive. "Dear God," Ethan whispers, collapsing into his chair. Ruth kneels in front of him. She spoke when she felt safe, when she heard the truth, that she is loved. That is the key, Mr. Hollingsworth. Not therapy, not appearances. Love. Tears stream down Ethan's face. For the first time, the powerful man looks small, broken, but also awakened. Outside the study, Vivian listens in the shadows. Her face twists with fury as Ruth's words echo, afraid of her mother. She storms away, her heels striking the marble like thunder. If Ruth had been a threat before, she is now a danger that cannot be tolerated. Vivian's whisper to herself is venomous. She thinks she can take my daughter from me, over my dead body. But Ruth has no fear left. She has the truth. And truth, once spoken, cannot be silenced. The battle lines inside the mansion have been drawn. The mansion no longer feels like a palace. It feels like a battlefield. Vivian's anger simmers in every corner, her voice sharper, her orders harsher. Staff walk on eggshells, fearful of triggering her wrath. Ruth, though, carries herself with quiet courage, no longer intimidated. She knows what she has seen, what she has heard, and she knows that truth has power. Grace clings to Ruth more than ever, following her like a shadow. The word beloved is now a constant whisper on the girl's lips, fragile but growing stronger each day. Every time she says it, Ruth's heart swells, and Vivian's rage deepens. One evening, Ethan calls a family dinner in the grand dining hall. For the first time in years, he is not distracted by his phone or business calls. He sits tall, his gaze heavy with determination. "Vivian," he says quietly, "we need to talk about Grace." Vivian stiffens. "Again with this nonsense?" Ethan continues, his voice firm. "I've been blind. For years I told myself our daughter was stubborn, difficult, broken. But I was wrong. She is none of those things. She is wounded, and I finally understand why." Vivian's fork clatters against her plate. "Careful, Ethan." Ruth sits silently at Grace's side, holding her small hand. The girl trembles, sensing the storm. "I know what happened." Ethan presses on. "That night in the East Wing. She saw you in one of your rages. She saw the violence, the screaming. It silenced her." Vivian's face drains of color. "How dare you?" "Enough!" Ethan slams his hand against the table, his voice booming through the hall. "I have allowed appearances, money, and pride to blind me. No more. My daughter will not suffer in silence for your vanity." Grace gasps softly, squeezing Ruth's hand tighter. Vivian rises from her chair, trembling with fury. "You believe her?" She points at Ruth, her fingers shaking. "A servant? A woman who whispers foolish words into our daughter's ears? You would take her word over mine?" Ethan stands, his eyes blazing. "I believe the evidence of my own eyes. I believe the sound of my daughter's voice spoken for the first time in years because Ruth told her the truth you never could." Vivian's mask cracks. Her voice becomes shrill, desperate. "She is mine, Ethan. My daughter. No nanny will take her from me." Grace begins to cry, whispering through sobs. "Beloved. Beloved." The word echoes in the vast room, small yet unstoppable. Ruth kneels beside her, whispering softly, "It's all right, sweetheart, you are safe." Ethan bends down too, placing his hands on his daughter's shoulders. His voice shakes with emotion. "Yes, Grace. You are safe. You are beloved. And nothing will ever silence you again." In that moment, something shifts. Grace lifts her head, her tears still falling, but her voice breaking free at last. "Daddy." The room goes still. Vivian staggers back, her face ashen. Ethan's knees nearly buckle, tears spilling freely. "My God," he whispers, pulling his daughter into his arms. "She spoke. She called me." Grace clings to him, repeating softly, "Daddy. Beloved. Daddy." Vivian stumbles, her hand gripping the back of a chair for balance. For years she dreamed of hearing her daughter's voice, but not like this. Not because of Ruth. Not because of love she could not give. Her triumph turns to ashes in her mouth. Ethan straightens, holding Grace protectively in his arms. His voice is no longer uncertain. It carries the weight of a final decision. "Vivian, this ends tonight. You have ruled this house with pride and cruelty, but no more. From this moment on, Grace's well-being comes first. Ruth stays. And if you cannot accept that, then you are the one who will leave." Vivian's eyes widen, her carefully built world collapsing in an instant. "You would choose them over me." Ethan's answer is quiet, but resolute. "I choose truth. I choose love. I choose my daughter." Caldwell, who has been silently watching, lowers her gaze. For the first time, she says nothing to defend her mistress. The staff exchange looks from the shadows, and one by one they bow their heads, silently siding with the truth. Vivian's lips tremble, but no words come. She turns, storming out of the hall, her footsteps echoing into the emptiness. As silence falls, Ruth places a hand over Ethan's and Grace's. Her voice trembles with gratitude. God never abandons the just, she whispers. Ethan nods, holding his daughter close. No, he never does. And in the heart of the mansion, once filled only with silence and pride, a new sound begins to rise. The fragile, healing voice of a child who is finally free. The mansion feels different. The walls, once heavy with silence, now echo faintly with the softest, most miraculous sound. Grace's fragile voice whispering, "Daddy, beloved," as she clings to her father's arms. Ethan holds her tightly, his tears soaking into her hair. Ruth kneels beside them, one hand resting gently on the child's back, whispering prayers of gratitude under her breath. But Vivian stands at the doorway, her face pale, her pride shattered. For years she ruled this house, convinced control was love, convinced appearances were worth more than truth. And now, in a single night, her daughter's first words have exposed everything she tried to bury. "You think this changes anything?" She spits bitterly. "You think one word makes her whole?" Ethan lifts his head, his eyes blazing. "It makes her free. And no wealth, no pride, no cruelty of yours will ever take that from her again." The staff begin to gather quietly at the edges of the hall. Caldwell, usually sharp and scolding, looks at Ruth with something like respect. The maids whisper to each other, awe shining in their eyes. For the first time, the hierarchy feels broken. The truth has shifted the balance. Ruth rises, her voice calm but strong. "Mrs. Hollingsworth, this child was never broken. She was silenced by fear, but fear cannot last forever, not when love steps in." Grace turns her face toward her mother. Her lips tremble, but she pushes the word out again, this time directly to the woman who wounded her. "Beloved." The word stabs deeper than any accusation. Vivian staggers back as though struck. Her daughter's first gift of speech, not hate, not anger, but love. Love she never gave, love she cannot claim. She covers her face, trembling. For the first time, Vivian has no reply. Ethan stands tall, still holding Grace. "Vivian, for too long we lived in a house of lies. But today, the lies are finished. I will not allow my daughter to grow up in fear. If you want to stay in this home, you will change, and if you cannot, then you will leave." The room is silent. Everyone waits. Vivian lowers her hands. Her mascara streaks her face. Her jewels gleam under the chandelier. But there is no power left in her eyes. She turns without a word, her heels echoing down the marble floor, vanishing into the shadows of the east wing. Grace breathes deeply, as though a weight has lifted from her chest. She clings tighter to her father and whispers again, firmer this time, "Daddy." Ethan laughs through his tears, pressing kisses to her hair. "Yes, my little Grace. Daddy's here. Always." Ruth smiles, her own tears streaming freely. She places a hand over Grace's small one and whispers, "And never forget, you are beloved." The girl repeats it louder now, her voice no longer trembling. "Beloved." The sound rings through the mansion like a bell of freedom. Days later, the mansion is no longer the same. Vivian is gone, her absence unspoken but felt like a storm that finally passed. The staff move with lighter steps. Caldwell, once so stern, softens her tone when speaking to Grace. Even the great halls feel warmer, filled not with cold silence but with laughter beginning to bloom. Ethan, humbled, spends his mornings with his daughter, walking hand in hand through the gardens he once ignored. Grace's voice grows each day, small sentences forming, fragile but full of life. And Ruth remains by her side, not just as a nanny, but as the guardian who reminded her she was more than silence. One afternoon, Grace runs to the garden, her teddy swinging in her arms. She points to the roses and says clearly, "Pretty." Ethan's eyes widen with joy. "Yes, sweetheart, very pretty." She turns to Ruth, beaming. "Beloved." Ruth kneels, hugging her tight. "Yes, darling, always." The camera of life pulls back. A mansion that once echoed with emptiness, now alive with hope. A child who was silenced now, speaking the first truths of her heart. A father redeemed. A mother undone by her own pride. And a woman of faith, whose whispers carried the strength of heaven itself. Because silence can last for years. Pride can reign for decades. But in the end, truth always rises. And love whispered in the dark, always finds its way into the light. Have you ever felt silenced by fear or by someone else's pride? This story reminds us, no silence lasts forever. God does not abandon the just. Love has the final word. Never lose hope. Justice may take time, but it always comes. And in the end, the good triumphs.